Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Great to have you here again. It's, it's been raining and raining and it's a very great day today. Today we've got a very special day. I just want to ask Mana to mute herself. Um, Today we've got a very great day because we've got Keith Handura from Namibia here today, and Keith is here to actually tell us all about a new innovation in the industry regarding building homes with reusable bricks that you can actually make in your backyard. So we're going to learn all about that today. So what Vision 2025 is about is to actually bring you every third Thursday a presentation from some innovative technology or solution that is totally unique and new, so that you can actually learn about what opportunities there are, what business opportunities there are with regard to these various innovative technologies and products and services that people are actually bringing in to actually make this world better. So that's what we're all about. So welcome to the show. Great to have you here. We've got Glenn Jones and Mana Ruitz, our co-hosts today, who will also be asking Keith a number of questions. And I'm just going to ask Mana just to quickly introduce herself. Mana, over to you.
Hi, good morning. I'm from a company called Inscorp Insurance Brokers, a company I started about 13 years ago. And we specialize in your commercial insurance and also in the transport and the export and import business specifically. That's me in a nutshell. I think today is about you.
Thank you, Mana. Great to have you here. Glenn, please introduce yourself.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. Appreciate it. And welcome, Mana. Welcome, Keith. Looking forward to chatting with you soon. My name is Glenn. I'm a life and business coach. I also do counseling and mentoring. I often say to people that I'm actually a personal locksmith because I love to unlock the potential inside people and actually help them step into their destiny. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell, but looking forward to this conversation. And back to you, David. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Welcome to the show. Thanks for co-hosting today. So my name is David Bauer. I'm a BID architect. I don't design buildings, but I design proposals and tender documents so that you can actually win new business and grow your business through actually acquiring tenders and winning tenders through different activities. So welcome to the show. And now let me introduce our guest speaker, Keith Handura. Keith is a business strategist and he's a sustainability advocate. He drives a new process from Germany. He's going to tell us all about it. And it's about revolutionizing the construction industry. Now, I did a BSc building science degree. And one of the things that we looked at, and this is in the 1980s, we looked at how to actually build buildings quicker and faster. And Keith has a solution to this. So thank you, Keith, for being here. So we're going to be talking about this. And the nice thing about this product, too, is that it's recyclable. In other words, you can break down the building and use it somewhere else. So this is something that's absolutely fantastic, and we're going to learn all about it. So, Keith, thanks for joining us. It's a really great pleasure. Keith's all the way from Namibia. He's taken his time to be here today to explain to us what this new innovative technology is all about. And so, Keith, my first question to you is, there's a big housing crisis. I think it's all over the world. And specifically, say, in these developing countries, a lot of people moving from rural areas into urban areas and building up these shanty towns. And obviously, it's a big thing in South Africa as it is in Namibia. So how does your product, the Polycare's technology, offer a sustainable and scalable solution to this crisis that we have? Over to you, Keith. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Now, first of all, thanks, David, and thanks to the rest of the Vision 25 team, Glenn and Mana. Pleasure to meet you guys, and thanks for this platform. I think, in a nutshell, the housing crisis is just is beyond just more homes, but more in terms of sustainable ways to build them. I think we all want a roof over our heads, but we want something that is long-lasting, good for the environment as well. And I think our technology provides that scalable, climate-friendly solution by replacing your traditional cement-based construction with a circular system that significantly cuts down your CO2 emissions. And then obviously beyond the environmental benefits, Polycare's approach is also to unlock green financing opportunities. So this allows governments and corporates to adopt a more sustainable construction method while accessing green bonds, carbon credits, ESG linked funding mechanisms to fund these infrastructure. So for example, a mine company building worker housing with our system could qualify for green financing incentives by demonstrating a commitment to circular construction, ensuring that once the mines is closed and decommissioned, the materials are used for social infrastructure rather than becoming waste. This creates obviously a win-win situation for the business in terms of achieving sustainability targets, but then also benefiting from cost-effective financing solutions that are available. Sorry, David, you're on mute.
Okay, they were on mute. So, this is a fantastic solution, because one of the biggest things, I've been in the construction industry, I've been with Murray & Roberts, I've had my own construction company, and one of the biggest things that we have is waste. Building waste. When you go along and you have to do a renovation, you demolish the walls. Obviously, you try and save some of the bricks, but inevitably you only save possibly about 70% of the bricks if you do it carefully. So, and obviously all the cement and so on is wasted. So my question, what is the fundamental difference from traditional construction with using your methodology?
Cool. A very good question. And I think you touched on a very important and critical part, which is the waste from the construction industry. That comes as a byproduct of either demolishing or clearing up a place to make alterations to a property. So traditional construction methods heavily rely on resource-intensive materials like cement, which contribute significantly to carbon emissions. Our approach is significantly different because with a geopolymer concrete, which reduces CO2 emissions up to 70%, and also because, like you mentioned, the blocks are reusable, not just in their form that they are, but if for whatever reason they become damaged, they can be brought into the manufacturing process to be remanufactured into new blocks, which means you can dismantle and reassemble without generating a lot of waste. Obviously, your fixtures, there might be some wastage in there if you need to do plumbing and electrical work, but the masonry system itself is quite reusable, and this obviously ensures long-term sustainability while reducing life cycle costs for developers and homeowners as well.
Sure. Fantastic. I think Mona's got a few questions. Mona?
Sorry, Mona, you still mute?
There you go. Let's try again.
Cool.
Yeah, we could put these on. At a certain age, we need these glasses. So my question would be, what challenges has Polycare faced in implementing its sustainability building solution, particularly in the markets in South Africa? But I don't think only South Africa, but the whole of Africa has got a huge problem with housing. So how have you overcome that?
Okay, obviously, I think that one of the biggest challenges has definitely been adoption, and not just from the clientele, but obviously from the industry in itself. Because David mentioned, in the 80s he was already involved in this space, so it's a long-going industry, and obviously you don't want to come in and sort of reinvent the wheel, but rather improve on what's currently there. So the biggest challenge, obviously, that the buy-in, and then secondly, it being a new technology, there's obviously some teething problems that we had to to overcome. One of the biggest ones, and that's where we're heading towards now with it, geopolymer, is the raw materials that we were previously using, especially during the COVID period, skyrocketed. And that's why we essentially made the call to say, okay, look, let's put a plug in it for now to stop the bleed, and let's work towards something that's more cost effective, but still ticks the right boxes in terms of sustainability. So previously we were using a binder made from polymer resin, but that was it formed around 12% of the total composition of the recipe, but the cost was the inverse, where 90% of the cost was the binder. So even a 5-10% increase in the binder itself had a significant impact over the overall profitability of the block. And obviously it sort of defeated the purpose of trying to access the market that we wanted if the prices were increasing. But fortunately now we have smart guys in the labs that are constantly working on improvements, and that's where the geopolymer technology is sort of now being spearheaded, had shown good successes, and that's where I'm focusing now to try and get that into the market, into the region. And that's why this conversation, especially to a South African audience, is very important to me as well.
Thank you. And then looking ahead, what are the next big innovations or expansions in Polycare are you working on to further its mission in the construction industry? Obviously, this is not the end of it. There must be something else to it.
Yeah. So obviously, it's the whole modular system that Polycare developed in itself stems from not just the efficiency of construction, but the circularity within the construction industry. For example, where I mentioned the mines where you can reuse the blocks multiple times. So the conversation now becomes interesting for architects, town planners, in terms of how do you develop future towns that over time can even change, but you're using the same sunk cost from the materials that you invested initially, and be able to redeploy new infrastructure, whereas with traditional brick and mortar construction, and usually it happens when there's a transition in government, then every new minister, whoever wants a new office or whatever the case is, but now it's almost like giving them a block of Legos and say, okay, you have the Legos, you can come up with your own design, and the next minister can come play with the same blocks and do their same construction. So I think that the biggest push for us is to build an ecosystem that sees circularity, not just from the manufacturing of the blocks themselves, but how we're financing these systems differently. And that's why I mentioned earlier, like for example, your green bonds, your carbon credits, that encourage these initiatives that are more cost effective, but then also the forward thinking in terms of if we're doing town planning or if we're doing temporary infrastructure, how do we bring that back into the ecosystem, either as social initiatives? For example, mines can even, when they come to end of life, they can take those blocks that they've used for staff accommodation and build early childhood development centers, build clinics, or whatever infrastructure might be needed in the community. So it's about having the right conversation with all the right stakeholders, government, corporates, investors, to get to the point where the ecosystem around circular construction is flourishing.
I think you should include women there, because I think every married man knows that we like change, like to move things around. So don't forget about us, though.
No, actually, we haven't. We actually have a great case study where it was a group of students from Zambia. They wanted to build an ablution block at their dormitories. And so they sent us the design and the budget and everything. And we manufactured the blocks and we shipped them up to Zambia for them, with obviously the construction drawings in terms of how to assemble. And it was a group of 5 ladies, and they managed to build the ablution blocks within 2 weeks, no issues. And I always joke
That's what I
that
wanna
I
hear.
think if it was men, they might have taken a bit longer because they wouldn't have followed the instructions. So I think
Yeah.
there is big scope for women in the industry when it comes to our
Absolutely.
technology.
It's like yesterday, I had a flood in my office, and David was very surprised when he rocked up there, and I was on the roof fixing the roof. There's no end of
Wow,
what we
okay.
can do if you want to.
That's good. Yes.
Yeah, I must say I was quite surprised to see Mono, and it was raining as well, and I was concerned that they were going to slip off the roof.
Wow. Okay.
Anyway, but it
Being
didn't
in
leak off.
insurance, I'm telling you all the risk associated to that, Mana.
Yeah, I got the cover in place.
Okay, cool.
Glenn, I think you've got some questions for Keith.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Keith. We're talking advancements in material science here, and you mentioned just now about this whole issue around concrete production, and it's a major source of CO2 emissions, especially because of cement use. And you obviously decarbonize concrete. And so how does Polycare actually balance using natural mineral materials, and yet you at the same time you ensure your reusability?
Okay,
How do you go
cool.
about doing that?
Very good question, and I think it speaks to also one of the root problems that Polycare wants to address. So our technology is made from secondary raw materials such as foundry sands and industrial byproducts in our geopolymer concrete. So this is waste that are already readily available within the industry, even construction waste itself, thereby significantly reducing the need for virgin material. Because I think, especially in Namibia, sand mining is quite a huge problem, and the mindset is always, but it's just sand, but obviously it has a ripple effect in terms of if it starts raining, floods, soil erosion, and everything like this. So, and that's what we're trying to, and again, that's where the conversation needs to be headed to, start thinking the mindset around how do we construct currently and how do we move to something using the waste that we currently generate. So the key is obviously our unique binder. I mentioned previously that we were using a geopolymer binder made from recycled plastics, obviously trying to keep the sustainability narrative, but obviously the input materials to make the resin is what's driving up the cost. Even though there's enough plastic around, there's still refinement that needs to be done. So that the binder is sort of the unique catalyst for this. And this allows the blocks to maintain their strength while maintaining their reusability. This means that after building has reached end of life, the materials can be repurposed rather than be discarded, which with your conventional brick and mortar cement, you can't do that. Once you've demolished it or that building has come to end of life, it's worthless at the end of the day, But obviously, maybe it's a conversation I can have offline with Marnet, and this changes now the narrative. How do we start ensuring these reusable buildings? So that's why working on the ecosystem around the technology is quite critical, because obviously now your immovable asset that you would previously have insured in a certain way or financed in a certain way has movable properties. So how do you now start financing it? And how do you start insuring it? And that's obviously a conversation for all the clever guys in the banks and the insurance guys to come up with solutions that speak to the technology long term.
Absolutely.
Hope that answers your question.
Yes, very much so. In fact, you've almost touched on my next question, and one of those issues is about the cost involved, but the challenges that you've faced in this industry, and specific in this area. How have you actually overcome that then? I mean, obviously the cost involved is you work in that in terms of that polybinder, but can you go into a little bit more detail about that?
I think so. From a Namibian context, I think seeing is believing, and so the proof is always in the pudding. So I think the projects that we've done have spoken for themselves, and I think that's the best catalyst for change. But obviously, with the cost, yes, we like it, but now how do we make it affordable? And that's sort of the next drive to say, okay, look, we've validated technology, we've had a group of ladies even being able to construct it with no issues. So the use cases are there, but now how do we make the affordability aspect of it achievable? And that's where, you know, we hard working towards that. And it's something that I'm hoping this conversation will also bring some interesting conversation from some of the audience members to say, look, Keith, let's reach out, let's connect and see how we can make it, because I'm sure there's a solution around it. It's just meeting the right people and having the right conversation, especially I think in South Africa as well, because one of the interesting things that I noticed recently in South Africa, I think it's the city of Cape Town, they introduced a program for, we'd call them micro contractors, where I think a portion of the budget was allocated to your sort of artisan SME type contractors to do developmental projects within the city of Cape Town. Now, our technology is the perfect technology for a program like that, because you can manage your wastage, which is predominantly where a lot of the losses comes from a construction site. You can manage your skill set requirement as well. You can manage your go-to-market or your delivery in terms of timelines. So those are the things that we're really hoping with the right conversations, we can start knocking on those right doors. And because the technology, I think, has been validated, it speaks for itself. It's not just, you know, convincing the right people, because obviously it won't appeal to everybody. It's the same way where you have people that drive Mercedes, you have people that drive VW. You know, you need to see who it appeals to. But I think in your municipalities that are struggling with housing delivery challenges, where they're struggling with substandard quality of building, you know, I think our technology sort of ticks those boxes, but it's not just getting in front of those people and preaching the gospel to them.
Absolutely. No, well spoken. Well said. Great. I wish you the best there. All right.
Yeah,
back to David.
Thank you, Glenn. Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, you know, how this actually works, and, you know, are we saying that a community can actually sort of like purchase or get hold of the molds of these blocks, get hold of the polymer, get hold of the waste material from the surroundings of wherever they stay, and then actually create the blocks and then actually build them themselves? Is this the process?
So in an ideal world, yes. I think what we're currently focusing on is obviously, especially now that we've moved away from the polymer resin binder, looking at the new binders, is coming up with not just a modular construction, but also a modular production facility. But what's critical there is obviously what filler materials do you have readily available. So if you're close to a foundry or too close to industrial waste site, it makes sense, because then logistically you're in close proximity of the raw materials that you need, because the filler material, the aggregates basically, is 90% of typically what the recipe would be. So if you still need to transport that to site, that obviously has an impact. But also that the idea is that as part of a go-to-market strategies, approaching guys that are already in that space of manufacturing bricks and looking at what the machine is that they're currently using, maybe repurposing the machine with mold, a few tweaks here, so that they can start using the concrete recipe or the polymer concrete cement recipe and start manufacturing these blocks for the market, but obviously at a more affordable rate. So there are different ways of modalities that we're looking at this. Obviously, like for example, now there's a whole green carbon drive, green hydrogen drive in Namibia. There's the offshore exploration taking place. So the town is booming. And I mean, just in terms of getting one of the green hydrogen plants up, they're looking at around 15,000 temporary workforce over the next 5 years. They need to be accommodated somehow. So that makes sense to say, okay, look, a plant to be set up there to to manufacture the blocks for this, because close by there's Rospina, which has been a mine that has been operating for a number of years. There's stockpiles of industrial waste, so it makes sense to do it in that way. So there's a lot of modalities that we're looking at, and that's where the technical feasibility study is quite critical to each market to see what modalities would typically work in that particular market. Sorry, Marna, I think you had a question or you wanted to say something?
Yes, the insurance, never stops. I think that I always have a discussion with my clients, because especially in the transport industry, is liability. Is you have to kind of cap your liability. And if you have all these people doing everything on its own, how would you limit your liability? Obviously, you can't have an open exposure to liability and the risk and the liability that goes with that. So if you have people, just the man on the street making their own blocks and build, and how are you gonna cap your liability then?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I don't think the big building of the blocks in your backyard would be a viable model, specifically due to the liability. And the example that I usually make there is, it's the same way that Mercedes won't let you have a backyard mechanic work on their cars just because of the warranty issues and everything like that. So to a certain extent, we would want to have quality control on the quality of the bricks that are manufactured through either the right channels. And that's why I mentioned, for example, if it's somebody that's already in the industry, already manufacturing bricks, that would be an ideal partner to work with. But then even in terms of go-to-market, you would want to partner up with your building material suppliers so that the material is readily available through those channels. But obviously, the one thing that you want to make sure is that the cost element is addressed during that as well. Because the biggest challenge, especially in the continent, you're sitting with cheaper alternative. And that's why building a shack from corrugated sheet metal is a popular choice. But if you can give people an alternative that's price related, close to what they're paying for corrugated sheet metal, but they have multiple uses. So even if they get evicted, the same way they'll pack up their corrugated iron, they can relocate or whatever the case is. Obviously, we're not saying we're encouraging the problem, but we're addressing a lot of other social concerns as well that comes with your corrugated sheet metal, where the shack fires, which are quite predominant in our market, I'm sure in South Africa as well, where our technology is non-combustible. So as a municipality that's trying to address housing crisis issues for their inhabitants, would rather say, okay, cool, yes, we'll allow you to legally occupy until we get a piece of land demarcated with all the services that you need, but can you please use this technology instead? Because then we avoid the shack fires that are currently happening. You get an insulated block that protects you from the elements during winter when it's cold, but it still keeps the unit cool during excessive heat during summer. So it's a very long-winded conversation that needs to take place to address all of those issues, because everybody wants a roof over their head and they'll do it with anything. But are you doing yourself, maybe you're doing yourself an injustice by going for a cheaper alternative just to say you have a roof over your head, than to say, okay, but what alternative is there to make this more sustainable in the long term? And I mean, one of the conversations that we're having with some of the contractors in the market, if you're doing mass housing projects, you have the option of saying, let me build with a sustainable technology that insulates the property. That means the end user's energy requirements are reduced, so they don't need to use the aircon longer than they need to because the house is well insulated. They don't need to have extra heating or cooling appliances in the house because of this. So now it's a trade-off between, am I going to pay that extra $1 on the block now, but end up saving $2 later on my utilities? And that's the conversation that we typically want to have. But the sad part is the housing need is immediate, So that's why we go for these shortcuts that come bite us in the end, because either the financiers are taking too long to finance us, or the municipality is taking too long to service land. So we occupy illegally and we build with what we can, so that if we get chased away, it's not a big loss for us. So there's a lot of social dynamics that we need to consider as well. Obviously, the risk being the main one. So it was a very long-winded way to answer your question. Hope it made sense.
Yeah, I think with the evictions, there's also the humanitarian crisis that goes with it. It's not a nice thing to go through. And yes, fires is happening, and climate change is happening. So it is real, and we need a better alternative than our people are living in at the moment.
Definitely. I mean, just before we continue, just another story I want to share. So there's a company called Empower. They were involved in a project in Mozambique because, again, we're struggling with shack fires. They have tropical storms, typhoons, and hurricanes that damaged the properties that side. And they came up with a funding vehicle that looks at sustainable technologies to enable people to move out that get easily broken down due to these tropical storms, but that are durable and sustainable. And that's where, again, an ecosystem is being created to enable a previously inaccessible technology to be available to the marginalized. And I mean, if we take the evolution of solar, think back in the days when solar started, it was a very expensive technology. But as things progressed and as South Africa was bombarded with load shedding, a lot of more cheaper alternatives came about where everybody now has a solar, whether it's a battery charger to just keep the cell phone on, or, so the technology has been evolving because the ecosystem enabled it, and I think it's the same with technologies like what Polycare is building. The ecosystem needs to enable it. We can't do it ourselves. So having the right conversation will spearhead those type of conversations, as well as enabling our technology further into the market.
Mm-hmm. Keith, thank you. I wanted to ask you another question regarding, cost saving. So, it's not just the product or the ingredients that go into building the blocks, it's the time.
Yes.
A normal building would take, say, 3, 4, 5 months. What is the cost saving as far as time is concerned regarding using your polyblock system?
Cool. So just looking at the previous Lego-like system that we had, based on a conventional 2-bedroom house, if you were to take the Polycare blocks and take a conventional brick and mortar house, with 5 guys, it takes you 3 days to get the walls up to roof level with a Polycare technology. But that's with your internal conduits for your plumbing and your electrical services in the walls already. And then you start finishing. So that gives you an idea in terms of the speed to delivery of the units in itself. And I mean, interestingly enough, we had a contractor that built a house in one of the towns, and the plans that they got were mirrored. So when the building inspector came from council, he realized, but the house was facing the wrong way. And that was the Friday. So they had to break down the walls, dismantle it, and reassemble it. But that whole dismantling and reassembly took 4 days. So they told him, no, okay, today's Thursday, come back on Tuesday, the house will be the right way around. You can't do that with your conventional. So even in terms of if there's mistakes or issues, you're able to address them on the fly, where your other technologies might not be able to give you that flexibility. So one of the biggest cost savings, I think, is essentially on your labor cost, as well as your time to delivery as well.
Yeah, no, that's a big factor, obviously, and obviously, I assume that the foundation would take the longest time to actually put in.
Not necessarily, and it's a video I'll share with you. So we have a partner or a company in South Africa that use that technology for some projects, and they have a suspended flooring foundation system that works with piles that get drilled into the ground. So that takes you a day to get your foundation ready, and then you start stacking your blocks. So you can use conventional foundation, or there's other technologies that fit well within our technology. And I mean, even in Europe, where our technology comes from, most of their houses are built with suspended flooring, just from a climate perspective, because the cold and everything. So it makes it easier if everything is suspended, you're under floor heating and everything like that. But obviously, from an African context perspective, we still rely on our conventional foundations. But there's a lot of other technologies that are coming out that can enable the quicker construction. And what Boxer has done in South Africa, they've relocated a few projects, not just in the same town, but in different towns as well. So they had I think it was a classroom that they had up in Joburg, which they relocated to KZN, to a kindergarten there, the whole building, So, and you can't do that. So in terms of your footprint, you literally leave nothing behind when you relocating or dismantling a property. So it changes so we have flexible lease tenure terms with government, where you have long-term leases, where especially in your tourism sector, if you given a concession to set up a lodge or a game reserve in a particular concession, all your infrastructure needs to be temporary, where technology like ours makes it much more easier as well.
Sure.
So I'm not sure if that answers your question, David.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Glenn has a question about the 3 R principles. Glenn?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You speak about digitalization in circular economies, and Polymer provides that digital proof. Have you spoken about the material composition and construction configurations? But how does this digitalization actually support what Dave spoke about, the 3 R's: reuse, repair, recycle?
Cool. So the digitalization basically creates a record where you ensure traceability of where this material is coming from for a particular project. And this allows you to plan for reuse and repair, ensuring that every block maintains its value over multiple cycles. And let's take again a mine, for example. If a mine is producing industrial waste, and we say, okay, from a traceability perspective, this material is coming from this mine, from this production. So we put that in there into the traceability. So at the end of life, we know exactly how many blocks were used, how much material was used. So you can quantify the number of blocks. So then you can already, if you say, okay, we're in our final year of operations, we're going to start dismantling already. But at inception, you already knew how many blocks would be available. So then you have a fresh set of Lego blocks that you can now start planning with to say, okay, look, what can we come up with in terms of the blocks that are available? Are we going to say, okay, look, as part of your severance, Keith, you've been working for the mine for the past 30 years. As part of your severance, you can take your house with that you've been staying with. It changes things completely. Or if we say, okay, look, we've engaged with the municipality in the community that we've been operating in. They've identified the following infrastructure projects. Then you know exactly, based on that, we have access to X amount of blocks that are coming out of the decommissioning of this mine that can build X amount of classrooms, X amount of clinics. Then it makes sure, because it's a sunk cost that was incurred by the mine, so the municipality or whoever you're engaging can then just fill the gap if it's a bigger project than what the mine has available. But at the same time, it brings an interesting dynamic for us as Polycare, where we can do an asset buyback option. Say after 25 years, if there's no use in that market, we can go to you and say, okay, because we know when those blocks were manufactured, we have the traceability, everything, we can look at what our production cycles are and say, okay, look, let's ramp down production because we know we're having X amount of blocks coming in from David's mine, for example. So it changes the way we operate as well. And the idea again comes back to saying that we don't have to go back to accessing virgin material because we know there's a pool of materials or blocks potentially coming back into either the production cycle or the construction cycle or whatever cycle that's there. And that's where you can essentially start creating a material bank where you know across all the projects, you have an idea of how many reusable blocks at any given time are there, so that if either government wants to relocate a whole town, for example, you can say, okay, we know we can relocate all those blocks or whatever the case is. Maybe not the best example, but I think you get what I mean. So it gives you an idea of, in the footprint of wherever there's a Polycare project, you're able to identify how many blocks are there, were they manufactured using foundry sand from mine ABC, or were they using slags from mine XYZ, and we can reuse them whenever, if needed, or whatever the case is. So it changes things completely. It's like it's having a carpool for bricks almost.
Sure.
That is quite fascinating, Keith.
I don't know how my time is, but I got a small question. Or not a question, it's a suggestion. I'm just thinking about 2010. Was it 2010 when we had the Soccer World Cup?
Yes.
And I remember all these guest houses and temporary housing places that was erected to manage all the incoming visitors. And I'm just thinking, if you target countries like to say, okay, you're going to have a problem with housing whilst, hosting a World Cup or any some likewise events. This would be a solution. I mean, if you have all these temporary housing available for the people coming into the country, but once it's done with its purpose, you can use it in areas where people really need housing. It's just something that I think would benefit a country as a whole, because you've got all these guest houses who now can't operate because everybody has left. They're no longer here. So you can reuse that in poorer areas.
Correct. Now, I think, Mana, you hit the nail on the head there in terms of a perfect use case for temporary infrastructure. And I think COVID was one of those situations as well where temporary health facilities had to be set up, So the use cases are endless in terms of you have one sunk cost of initial manufacture, but multiple life cycles of the same technology and different use cases for the same technology. So it really, I think, very biased opinion, but I think it's going to be a game changer if we get the right traction in the right markets.
Keith, I'd like to thank you very much for being here today and answering a number of questions. I think your model is absolutely fantastic, and you're basically creating a very much similar to the car market. Where you're creating a second-hand car market as well, where you can actually have not a car market but a building market, a housing market, where you can actually sell your house afterwards and not the land. So I think this answers a number of problems in here, especially in Africa. And I love your idea of, you work for a company and once you leave, you can then take your house with you. I think that's brilliant. But Keith, we're coming to the end of our show, and I wanted to ask you, what do you need? What are you asking the listeners to do? What is it that you need from us?
Very important question, David. And I think I mentioned it quite a few times that the big thing for any technology is obviously the ecosystem that you're building around it. So we need government to implement the right policies to incentivize sustainable construction, whether it's either through tax breaks, carbon credit programs, green financing mechanisms. I mean, like, for example, what Mana was saying in terms of the World Cup. If a technology like this was available during the World Cup, government could have said, okay, if you have a vacant piece of land and you're willing to participate in this temporary housing project, here's the incentive for something like that. That's sort of government spearheading this. And from a business perspective, I think it's not just saying that we sustainable, but acting like it as well. So there needs to be a transition to low carbon construction as well. You can't be saying, no, we're a green business, but you have a very high carbon footprint in your nice big corporate office that you're having. So we need to start preaching the ESG gospel through our actions as well. And I think that the last one, which I think is the most important one, is obviously from the investor market to say, okay, look, I think the future of finance is obviously green. We've seen it all over the world. So sustainable construction presents a huge investment potential, from climate bonds to sustainable linked loans. So the shift is slowly happening. I mentioned the Empower in Mozambique, that they actually funding their construction projects through raising of NFTs, which is digital currency. So that's a totally different ball game altogether in terms of potential funding vehicles for this. So the appeal to the investor market is to obviously jump on board to support our feasibility in the South African markets in the region, but then also to come up with innovative ways of how we're funding this. I mentioned the example earlier, you're no longer funding a permanently immovable asset. You're funding a reusable asset that has permanent characteristics, if I can put it like that. So how do you change that in terms of, are we gonna look at a pay-as-you-use type of model in the funding, or a rent-to-own model that allows you to, or lay-by option for your house? That's where your investors will come up with hopefully innovative ways to support this. And lastly, if somebody, if the product is available in the market eventually, to start supporting it by building houses, and I mentioned, the proof is in the pudding. It's we can only show what we have until you see it. So that's my appeal to the audience.
Thank you, Keith. Absolutely. I just want to ask Glenn what his major takeaway from today was. Glenn, over to you.
Thanks, David. Thank you, Keith. If I can put it as just one word, I would say revolutionary. Just amazing. As I'm sitting here and you've been speaking, I'm thinking of a whole lot of ideas where this can actually be used effectively. A very simple idea, in fact, a challenge that I've seen that most people have as your parents get older, to try and put them in an old age home is extremely costly. And you can actually build some in your backyard. It's just quite amazing. It's limitless, really. It's just endless. It's really crazy. So I love this idea. I think it's absolutely amazing, and I wish you all the best. And I'm certainly looking at these points. I've made notes of it, and we'll certainly get back to you and chat to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Glenn. Mona, what's your big takeaway?
Storage. I'm thinking, I mean, a simple thing about if you have a lot of stuff, it would be amazing to use it as storage. I'm thinking about storing spaces, like I don't know, you've got where you store some of your stuff, you don't have space in your house. There's a huge opportunity for somebody to start a business just by creating storage space for people. I mean, it's endless. This product has got endless opportunities. If there's nobody out there who's taking it on, I mean, I wouldn't understand it. It's endless. But thank you for sharing that.
No, thanks for the business idea, Mona. Appreciate it. I've made a mental note. There's an opportunity there, definitely.
So
I'm available for more.
Cool.
So Keith, thank you very much for being here today. This video will be available on YouTube, also on LinkedIn as well, and Facebook. You can go and watch it. You can also, we'll be doing our Future Forward newsletter, where we'll do a summary of today's discussion, which you can go and follow. We meet every Thursday, and the first week on every Thursday is a networking opportunity. So please come and join that. You all come in and we do it on Zoom, so you can come and talk and tell us all about who you are and what you do. Then the second Thursday of the month, we go along and invite successful businesses in Southern Africa to come along and talk about their journey. Then the third Thursday, as we've done today, we talk about different innovative products and services that are now coming available into the Southern African hemisphere to actually improve our lives. And thank you, Keith, for doing that today. And then our fourth Thursday of the month is all about self-development, where we actually invite different coaches and different people who can give us some hints on how to actually make sure that we have the best year ever. So that's what we're all about. I'd like to thank you all for being here today. If you have any comments and what have you, or questions, please get hold of Keith. He's on LinkedIn. You'll see his link on LinkedIn. And we'll also post his details on the Facebook and YouTube as well. So thank you, Keith, very much for getting hold of us. And Keith, just tell us your website is. What is your website and your email address?
Yeah, so my email address that you can contact me on is keith@polycare.co.na, all small letters. Polycare is polycare.co.na. And then, so for the Polycare, you can use polycare.de or sembla.de. So those are the two. So Sembla is the technology in itself, and then Polycare is the mother arm. So basically, so those are the two websites that you guys can access.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, we're out of time. So thank you very much for all of you for being here. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Keith, for your time. It's been a very productive show. I'm sure we've all learned something. I certainly have. And I wish I'd had the solution and thought process in the 80s when I did my when I did my master's degree. I had to also put a proposal together on housing, and this would have been an ideal project to look at. So thank you for that. Great.
Thanks.
I'm also going to post the video that Keith gave us on all the channels, so you can go and watch that if you want to find out a little bit more. And please feel free to get hold of Keith to find out more and to find out if what opportunities there are, especially here in Southern Africa. So thank you, everyone, and blessings to all you. Have a fantastic week, and look forward to seeing you next week. So I'm going to end the show, and thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Keep well.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.